everybody. It's been a little while since we've posted a video online, but today, beginning of the new year, lovely sunny morning, and I want to share with you Hamamelis, plant that I'm absolutely passionate about. I first fell in love with these when we lived in London, where I was a bit like a caged bird really, not being able to get out into gardens, and in the depths of winter I would go into Richmond Park, and there's a beautiful garden in there called the Isabella Plantation. And I was just struck by these beautiful shrubs flowering in the middle of January. However cold and frosty the weather, these beautiful flowers have the ability to withstand whatever the weather can throw at them. So however much frost or snow or wind or rain comes, they still look absolutely perfect. Hamamelis, otherwise known as witch-hazel. There are, broadly speaking, 4 main species. Vernalis and virginiana, which are both American species, and then we've got mollis and japonica. Hamamelis mollis is the Chinese witch hazel, Hamamelis japonica the Japanese, and most of the hamamelis that you will see today growing in people's gardens or in the garden centres, if you're looking to purchase one, are actually hybrids, so they're crosses between the Japanese and the Chinese hamamelis. And so they're always named as Hamamelis, X for cross, intermedia, and then the cultivar name. This one we've got here is called Hamamelis X intermedia, Pallida. Pale flowers, these lovely pale, lemony yellow, spidery flowers. And they often start coming out in the autumn before this one's even lost its leaves. But then they'll go on right through December, January and into February. So these lovely lemony yellow flowers have a beautiful, beautiful citrusy, spicy scent. Absolutely gorgeous. It's being released really well on this sunny, warm day. The darker the flower colours, a lot of the other cultivars come in different colours, so oranges and reds. The darker the flower colour becomes, the more spicy and heady the scent almost becomes. The paler lemony ones tend to be more citrusy in my experience. You'll often find with scented flowers at this time of year, they have very, very strong scents, particularly released on a warm day, and that's to attract their pollinators. And if you think about it, in the middle of winter in January, there aren't many pollinators around. So they have to be able to release their scent. It has to be very strong for them to say to all those insects, come and pollinate me. The other thing about these shrubs, although they look spectacular at this time of year in January, is they have beautiful autumn colour as well. A lot of them will colour to orange and red coloured leaves, but the yellow cultivars, broadly speaking, tend to colour to yellow, buttery, lemony yellow autumn coloured leaves this one has. So if you want to plant one for autumn colour and you want reds and orange, choose one that goes orange or red flowers in the spring, so Diane or Jelena. We'll have a look at some more of the cultivars in a moment. But for pale yellow autumn colour, stick with the yellow cultivars. Tend to be quite slow growing. They favour a sunny spot, although they are really woodlanders, but they'll do better on the edge of a woodland or in a woodland glade where they can get enough sunshine. If they get enough sunshine, they'll flower beautifully, and their autumn colour will also be much better. They're fairly slow growing plants, so you're not going to be dwarfed by one. This specimen here is my oldest one, and I planted it here in 1997, so you can see it's 24 years old, and it's made a nice, good-sized spreading shrub, I would say. If you've got a smaller garden and you're worried about them becoming too big, they respond really well to pruning, and you can grow them in pots as well. They prefer an acidic soil, but it's not necessary. Again, with acid soil, they will tend to colour better in the autumn. But what they wouldn't like is a really, really heavy, non-draining, waterlogged clay in the winter. And they don't like to be too dry in the summer. Although having said that, once they're established, they are fairly drought resistant. So really fairly easy plants to grow, and people are put off them in the nurseries because they're very expensive, or otherwise because they don't go to the nurseries and garden centres during the winter months. So they're not really aware of the variety of shrubs that are out there available at this time of year. Okay, so the first Hamamelis we looked at was very lemony yellow flowers, and as I mentioned, they come in all sorts of different shades of colours, right through from pale lemony yellow to orangey yellows to deep dark yellows, right through the range of oranges to red, and there are even some purple cultivars as well now. But this one again is another hybrid. It's a really good one, easy to get hold of. It's called Diane, and you can see these lovely deep sort of coppery red flowers, and this one colours beautifully to bright red leaves in the autumn as well. And the scent is really spicy on that one, although not quite as strong. I'd say if you want to pick one for scent, go for the paler ones. Another species of Hamamelis that I mentioned to begin with, Hamamelis vernalis, they're also widely available, and the easiest one to get hold of is Hamamelis vernalis Sandra. They're quite different to the mollis and japonica hybrids in that they form a much more upright, small shrub, and they flower much later, and the flowers are very prolific, but they're a little bit smaller. They're not quite as showy as the intermedia hybrids, and not as scented either. But they do have the most stunning autumn colour. So possibly the best, I think, of all the Hamamelis for the autumn colour for this one, Sandra. So this one here is Hamamelis mollis. This is the Chinese witch-hazel, and it's the one that's used to do all the crosses and to create the ex-intermedia cultivars. So you can see the spidery yellow flowers, they're quite nicely scented, but it's the parent of most of the cultivars that we see today. Fallen in love with Hamamelis, I began to collect a few every time I found more different varieties available, and a few years ago we realised we got so many different varieties here that it was suggested to me that I ought to put forward our collection to be assessed by the Plant Heritage Society, and they actually awarded us a national plant collection for our Hamamelis cultivars a couple of years ago, which we're very excited about. The only problem is that now I've discovered there are so many, it's like a mission to try and collect as many as I possibly can. I am almost up to 100 now, different varieties, so if you can make it over to the gardens during the next month or 6 weeks, then do, because they are absolutely beautiful, so many different varieties to see. We've got lots and lots still stored away in pots waiting to be planted out as well, so there's many more additions to the collection, but I think there's about 40 different types in the gardens already that are mature and flowering at the moment. Okay, so this is another intermedia hybrid called Yelena, widely available. Again, you can see it makes a lovely wide spreading branching tree, fairly slow growing. This one's been here over 20 years. And this one's got yellowy orange flowers with deep red centres, so really pretty. Often the flowers sort of change colour as they mature. They sometimes come out a paler colour, and as they mature they will go to deeper oranges and reds. Other varieties do the opposite way round. They may be redder in bud and then open to paler colours, but all sorts of different shades. They have really subtle markings on these spidery-like petals. We've come over to the other side of the woods now, which was developed 10 years ago as opposed to 20 years ago. So some of these cultivars are slightly smaller. This is a beautiful one that I found about 10 years ago, and I had to have it and plant it because it's called Hamamelis Robert, and Robert being a very traditional family name for me, with both my grandfathers called Robert, my father and my brother both called Robert, an uncle and a cousin as well. So this is Hamamelis Robert, but beautiful colours. You can see how some of the petals are really quite red, and yet some of these other new ones are really quite orangey yellow still. So this is another large flowered intermedia cultivar. This one's called Vesna. The flowers are slightly more orangey yellow on this one, but again, beautiful, really spicy, citrusy smell. This is another red flowered cultivar. This one's called Hamamelis ex intermedia Rubin, and you can see here the buds are only just coming out on this one. So the Hamamelis season is really long, even with the intermedia cultivars. The earliest ones start flowering well before Christmas. And these ones are only just coming out now, so they'll be flowering into February. So it's almost a really good 3-month season with the Hamamelis. Really valuable shrubs for the garden. This is a really curious one, Hamamelis intermedia gingerbread it's called, and it is a really gingery colour with the flowers just coming out now at the moment. But the most curious thing about this is its habit. It's growing so low to the ground and spreading. I suspect I could have trained it a different way if I'd wanted, but actually I'm quite happy just to let it do its own thing. So this is another yellow flowering cultivar, Wisley Supreme it's called. So really lemony, strong scent. But you can see it's a completely different habit. This one has grown much taller. That may be because it's in more of a surrounded woodlandy setting. But anyway, it makes quite a nice contrast to a lot of the spreading ones. I've just noticed something else on this Hamamelis. If I can get Maria to bring the camera down really low. Hamamelis are what we call grafted. So they're not, most of them, these cultivars, these intermedia cultivars, are not actually growing on their own rootstock. They're growing on a rootstock. Most commonly used one is virginiana, one of the American varieties. And they use that because it's more vigorous. So the top growth is taken as a graft material from the variety that the nurseryman wants to reproduce, and then it's grafted onto the rootstock. And you can see here where the graft has happened. So the rootstock is quite different. But if you can see this growth coming here from the side, this one's actually coming from the rootstock and not from the plant that we want. And if this is not removed, what happens is because the rootstock is more vigorous, this will outgrow the actual cultivar that we want, and it will take over the plant, and you'll get virginiana growing on the same plant as the desired cultivar. So what we need to do is take these off. Now you could remove it with secateurs, but I prefer to just literally pull them away like that, and it takes all the growing tissue away. Danger is if you cut it off here, it will just make it branch and you'll have 3 or 4 suckers to remove next year. So if you're going to spend money on a Hamamelis, it's really important that you do regularly check them. Once a year I'll go right round the collection and check if there's any suckers growing from the bottom. Otherwise you'll lose your desired cultivar that you've spent a lot of money for and end up with a whole load of virginiana. This is another vernalis cultivar, so one of those slightly later flowering, smaller flowers, but this one's called Amethyst, and you can see the colour of these petals is probably as close to purple as you'll get in a Hamamelis. We've just stopped here, another red flowering variety. See again the suckers coming from below the graft here, so I'm just going to pull these off whilst we're passing before they get too big. There we go. This is another lovely red coloured cultivar called Livia. Just stopped to show you another vernalis cultivar. Remember, those are the ones with the slightly smaller, later flowers, but fantastic autumn colour. And this is actually a weeping variety. This one's called Hamamelis vernalis, Lombard's weeping. It's only about 6 or 7 years old, but once you can imagine, once that's a tall tree, it will really be quite magnificent in full flower. Okay, so I've just got a couple of nursery stock out of the tunnel just to show you these. I was explaining about the grafting process, and if we zoom in here, you can see where the rootstock has been used and a V has been cut in it, and then the graft material has just been slotted into that, and that would have been bound with some grafting tape initially until the graft took. It's a bit like doing a skin graft. So now this is the new cultivar growing on the rootstock. But you can see what's happened here. This is the rootstock from the bottom, and again it's shooting. You can see this vigorous shoot that's come up in one season, which has grown double the height of the graft itself. So again, what we need to do is just remove that carefully, and again just do it by pulling it downwards, she says. There we are. And ease it off so that it doesn't rip too much. But it takes the whole of the growing point away from it there. It's much better than cutting them. I've got another one here to show you. This is Yelena. And this one, you can see the shoot is actually coming from below the ground. So again, the graft you can see has happened here. This is the graft material, so the cultivar that's wanted. This is the rootstock here. And this shoot here and these little ones are all growing, if you just move the soil away there, from down below. So again, let's just remove those. So this process of grafting Hamamelis means that there's a lot of failures in the nursery trade, and it's a very slow process to reproduce in order to sell these cultivars, which makes them very expensive to buy. So people often balk at the prices and think, I'm not going to spend that much. But having seen these beautiful shrubs out in the woods, they're worth every single penny that you can invest in them. They will give you years and years of certainly 6 months value in the garden. And even in the summer when they're not flowering and their foliage is not coloured spectacularly, they're still really nice, elegant branched shrubs to have. So a really good value plant all round.